Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Gurureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trilokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Vedya Dravinam Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Vatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So this evening we begin the 10th chapter, the Lamp of the Theater. Puneet, will you help us out, please?
Yeah, chapter 10. Dashamodhyaya Nataka Deepaha, the lamp of the theater. Paramatma Tvayananda Purna Purvam Swamayaya Swayam Eva Jagat Bhatva Praveshajat Jiva Rupataha. Before the projection of the world, the Supreme Self, the secondless, all bliss and ever complete, alone existed. Through his Maya, he became the world and entered into it as the Jiva, the individual self.
Yes, so here it's a rephrasing from scripture. This word Maya, I like the definition. It describes how the impossible becomes possible. So just to review, for Vedanta, the world is not created, the world is not manifested, the world comes about by means of imagination, sankalpena, by means of imagination. So consciousness, which is one without a second, because of its nature, has within it the image of this phenomenal world. And then apparently manifests as what seems like individual beings. Now, this becomes easy to understand again using Gaudapada's classic imagery in the 2nd chapter of the Mandukya Karika. You are the God of your dream. So in your dream, you're one unified mind because of its mini Maya Shakti, called going to sleep, then projects a body, a dream body, which becomes a locus of perception. You peep out at the dream world from it. Sometimes we have kind of a a godlike universal presence of looking down on the dream. But most of them were in the dream body, it seems. And there's an apparent ego identified with it. And from that ego, I perceive a dream world outside, and I have dream thoughts and feelings, judgments, etc. inside. But Vedanta then asks the question, are you in the dream or is the dream in you? Have you really manifested a dream entity? Is the dream body and the dream ego a real thing? Well, it's certainly a real experience. Nobody doubts that. But upon awakening, we see that it comes about by means of imagination. So the macrocosm works in a similar way. Whereas in my individual dream, usually, even though I have other people in my dream, the locus is my own dream body, my own dream ego. Whereas in this jagat, the creation, each individual has the feeling of jiva bhavana. I'm a person, I'm seeing my individual experiences. All of that comes about by the play of the infant. Any thoughts on this? And anytime a jiva were to slow down, purify the mind, and inquire into its essential nature, that assumed individuality falls. And the universal experience is, I am that space of consciousness, the ground. Next verse.
विष्णवाद्युत्तम देहेषु प्रविष्टो देवता भवत् मर्त्याध्य धमदेहेषु स्थिततो bhajati devatam. Entering the superior bodies like that of Vishnu, he became the deities, and remaining in the inferior bodies like that of men, he worships the deities.
So, just like in my dream, I can have the superior body. I am the star of my dream. But then there's all these subordinate characters. If I dream about my brother, or I dream about my father, or I dream about an old childhood friend, they're still me, appearing as those people, but lesser characters. So also the infinite manifests as the gods. Of course, the first and most important is Prajapati, the creator itself, Brahma, the creator God, Ishvara, the Lord of it all. And here, Vidyaranya is implying a sense of hierarchy all the way down to us humans. I would even say the dogs and the frogs, the worms and the germs as well. But all of them, from the standpoint of their equipments, are just manifestations of the infinite. And from the standpoint of the awareness that enlivens and enlightens them. It's all Brahman. Next verse.
Anek janma bhajanatva vicharam chikirshati vicharena vinasthayam mayayam shishyate swayam. Due to the practice of devotions in many lives, the jiva desires to reflect upon his nature. When by inquiry and reflection Maya is negated, the self alone remains.
Yes. So, in the dream of this world, just like if you have a dream and you go through many episodic events in the dream, you start off in a house, and the next thing you know, you're driving down a hill, and the next thing you know, you're entering into a park, and then you get out of the car and you see the buffalo, and then the next thing you know, you're riding the buffalo up a hill. So you have all these episodes in the dream that are happening to the dreamer ego. So also, this dream ego called the transmigrating soul goes through its numberless incarnations. Just like sometimes you may have a lucid dream. Oh my gosh, I'm dreaming. All this is a dream. So also, in time, that dream ego in the waking state begins the practice of self-inquiry, Atma Vichara, and rediscovers its essential nature. Next verse.
Advayanandarupasya swadvayatvam cha dukkhita bandha prokta swarupena sthitir muktir ritiyate. The duality and misery of the secondless self, whose nature is bliss, is called bondage. Abiding in its own nature is said to be liberation.
So, read the first part again.
The duality and misery of the secondless self, whose nature is bliss, is called bondage.
Okay, so I'm going to push back on this. I'm not quite sure of the Sanskrit. The self does not suffer. The self is never really bound. What is it that gets bound? This phony identity that's created. The jiva. Not a word I like to use. I tend to use jiva bhavana, the attitude or the feeling. Going back to our example of the dream. If you have a dream and you dream you're stopped by the police, and in the dream you're carted off and put into prison, it's the dream ego that thinks it's in prison. You are still in your bed. Is there anybody who's really in prison in the dream? Not really. Likewise, this body, mind, intellect with its ego sense, which is caused by beginningless ignorance, goes through its trials and tribulations. And the cause of it is the ignorance that occurs in the Vijnanamaya kosha, subtle intellect, which makes me think that this imagined self is the, what is moksha? When that intellect, which itself is a product of Maya, comes to rediscover, oh, I'm not a person, I'm not the body, I'm that ground of being. And listen carefully, that does not liberate the self. It liberates the mind. When the mind quits believing itself, that individuality goes poof. Just like when you wake up, dreamer and all its problems are gone. Next verse.
अविचार कृतो बंधो विचारेण निवर्तते तस्मात् जीव परात्मानः सर्वदैव विचार्येत्. Bondage is caused by want of discrimination and is negated by discrimination. Hence, one should discriminate about the individual and Supreme Self.
Yes. So the cause of my bondage is ignorance. First, there's the avarana shakti, the veiling power, which is nothing more than my vasanas, the bundle of them. Then there's the vikshepa shakti, the projecting power. What do I project? I feel like a person. I have some goal in order to be happy, and kartavya, obligatory action. When the individuality rediscovers its essential nature, the cause for the suffering is removed. Which is this belief that I'm a person. Oh. So, what's the difference between the miserable creature living under a bridge and the saint Ramana Maharshi? The self in them is the same. The self in them is never bound. What's different is their minds. And that makes all the difference in the world. Next verse.
अहमित्यभिमन्त्य कर्ता सौ तस्य साधनं मनस्तस्य क्रिये अंतर बहिर्वृत्ति क्रमोत्थिते. He who thinks I am is the agent. Mind is his instrument of action, and the actions of the mind are of two types of modifications in succession, internal and external.
Okay, so in the subtle intellect, we have this karta, this agent. And what's its job? It attributes to the self the qualities of the not self. I am Jim. I have qualities. I'm old, fat, memory's going, my body hurts, I'm successful here, I'm not successful there. All those ideas where I attribute to the self the qualities of the not self. And then that whole projection through the mind, and then through the senses, and eventually through the body, which acts on all that in the world. And again, it's all dream-like. You have the same experiences at night in the dream state. But is it real? Well, we can't say that it is, and we can't say that it isn't. Just like none of the activities of the dream touch me, the waker. None of the activities of the karta, the agent, ever touch the self. Next verse.
Antarmukham hamityesha vritti karta muliklet barhir mukhe dimityesha brahmam vastitva dumilikhet. The internal modification of the mind takes the form of I. It makes him an agent. The external modification assumes the form of this. It reveals to him the external things.
Yes, and again, this becomes very clear if we go to the dream state. So in the dream, I have the dream body, and it's the locus of perception is the term I like to use. I peep out of that dream body at the dream world. And then I have that karta, that agent that's identified. I am the character in the dream. But it's the same mind that creates the dream objects, which appear as other. My direct experience is I'm in the dream and I see people, places, things, and situations out there. And they have qualities, joy-giving, misery-producing, weird. And then inside, I have reactions. I feel this, I think that. Have all the same elements that occur in the waking state. I like to use the imagery. Consciousness strikes the subtle intellect is like the sun striking a prism. Sun hits a prism, you put a piece of white paper underneath, and you get the rainbow, you get the spectrum. It's the light of the sun itself that splinters, shatters, refracts into the rainbow spectrum. Likewise, consciousness strikes the buddhi, the vijnanamaya kosha, and splinters, shatters, refracts into triputi, the triple factor, knower, knowing, and known. Exactly what happens in the dream state. This is no different. Next verse.
Idamo ye vishesha swar gandharupa rasadayah asankhyena tanbhinadhat dhanadindriya panchakam. The external things that are cognized by the mind in a general way, their special qualities have been jumbled up are cognized by the five sense organs quite distinctly as sound, touch, color, taste, and smell.
Read the first part again. I didn't quite catch it.
It says the external things, and in parentheses, that are cognized by the mind in a general way, their special qualities having been jumbled up, end parentheses, are cognized by the five sense organs quite distinctly as sound, touch, color, taste, and smell.
Yes, now this is just for humans. So the mind splinters into seeability, tasteability, touchability, hearability. What did I miss? Smellability. And then the phenomenal objects take on those qualities. So it's interesting. For a person who's born blind, if they're here in my living room, they can certainly cognize my coffee table. They have a sensory experience of it. But they probably have no visual perception of it. Through the sense of touch, through understanding space. Very interesting. Very interesting. So this is how the mind takes, how its nature, again, refracts. And this jumbled up, what he's referring to technically is called the Panchakaranam, the fivefold division and subsequent recombination. So every object in the world is a jumbled combination of these five sense perceptions in a unique way, so that the table is not perceived in the same way as the chair or the lamp or the carpet. Next verse.
Kartaram chakriyam tadvad vakyavritta vishyanapi sphorayedekanena yosau sakshatra chidvapuhu. That consciousness which reveals at one and the same time the agent, the action, and the external objects is called witness in the Vedanta.
Yes. So this witness is the knower, the knowing, and the known of the world. Pretty easy to see that I'm not the objects. It's pretty easy eventually to see I am not the means of knowledge, hearing, seeing, tasting, touching, smelling. Eventually we get subtle enough to see I am not the thoughts, the feelings. But when you get subtle enough to be able to see that the ego is an object that rises and falls, thins and thickens, you begin to see that's a personal sense of self that's different than the witness. This is the most important discrimination to me. Next verse.
Ikshe Shrinomi Jigrami स्वादयामि स्पृहास्यहम् इति भासयते सर्वम् नृत्यशालास्थ दीपवत्. The witness, like the lamp in a dancing hall, reveals all these as I see, I hear, I smell, I taste, I touch, as pieces of knowledge.
Yes. So this illuminating awareness. It's like in a hall, there's a lamp, there's people dancing there's people dancing there, etc. Illumines each one. It manifests for the individual as I see this, I see that, I hear this, I know that, etc. Next verse.
I guess, Jim, also it's implied here that the witness is not an object of perception.
Yes. In the end, the witness is another name for the self.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So listen carefully. In the beginning, we suggest that people take on a practice called Sakshi Bhava, meaning watch your mind, pay attention to your thoughts, your feelings, notice stuff. Take on the attitude of the witness. Actually, we find that you can't become the witness. You just begin to notice that you've always been the witness. Is that clear to people?
Yeah.
All right, next one.
Nrityashala sthito deepa prabhum sandhyascha nartakim deepayeda visheshena tadbhavepi deepyate. The light in the dancing hall uniformly reveals the patron, the audience, and the dancer. Even when they are absent, the light continues to shine.
Yes. So you've got modern day image, you're at the theater and the house lights are on and they're illuminating the patron who's there in the entry hall ushering people in. He's wearing his tuxedo. All the ladies in their gowns and the men in their tuxedos are coming in. And then there's the actors on the stage. But when the show is over and the engineer forgets to turn the lights off, the patron, the audience, and the dancers all go home. And it's illuminating an empty home. So the self is that which illumines the presence of thought, the presence of sense perception, the presence of egoism, and their absence. You see that there's a phone in my hand? Yes. Do you see there's no phone in my hand? Yes, no phone. I can see the presence of the phone and the absence of the phone. So when that sense of feeling like a person thins out, the lights don't go off. You remain. Now, what's deep sleep? Someone takes a ladder up to the lights and screws a cap on the lamps, but the lights are still on. but there's no light shining in the auditorium because there's a cap on the lights. So in deep sleep, the mind is folded up into the veil of darkness. It's like, close your eyes. Are you blind? No. You are seeing the back of your eyelids. Back in the old-timey days when people had cameras before they all used their phones, you'd put the film in the camera, you're going around, you're going to take all these wonderful pictures of Venice, and you forget to take the lens cap off. I've done that, by the way. What's the film look like? Black. That's what deep sleep is. All right, next verse.
Ahankaram dhyam sakshi vishaya napi bhasyayet ahankaradhya bhavepi swayam bhatyeva purvavat. The witness consciousness lights up the ego, the intellect, and the sense objects. Even when the ego, etc., are absent, it remains self-luminous as ever.
Yes. So I haven't done this in years, but in the old-timey days, when we had lots of people in class, and I would be teaching one of the beginning classes, and I would try to demonstrate how you can see egoism thicken and thin and disappear. I'd say, okay, there's so-and-so sitting on the couch. Now let's look at them. Let's see if they spilled lunch all over their shirt. Do they have spinach on their teeth? People would look at them, and all of a sudden you'd see that person get self-conscious and nervous and turn red. Ego thickening. Then you're deeply engaged in some project, and ego thin. And if you spend lots of time in deep meditation, you keep renouncing, keep letting go, providentially, hopefully, you will have direct experience of that personal sense of self just gone. Sometimes it's gone for good, sometimes it comes back. But it's very clear that it's an object of perception. It's another thing that you know. It's not who you are. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Nirantaram bhasamane kutasthe ज्ञाप्ति रूपतः तद्भासा भासमानेयं बुद्धिर्नृत्य nekadha. The unchangeable witness is ever present as self-luminous consciousness. The intellect functions under its light and dances in a variety of ways.
So that's what happens. The self, the witness, illumines the various states of the intellect. They take on the states of waking, dream, and deep sleep, the intellect. They pass through the gunas, tamas, rajas, and sattva. And it is in the subtle intellect that this karta, literally it means the agent, the doer, manifests. Now listen carefully. That agent is not evil. The equipment couldn't function in the world without it. It's the false identification that becomes problematic. Puneet, can I share a bit of stuff you shared with me about one of your retreats?
Sure.
So, correct me if I misunderstood you, but you had this sense that it was on one of these 10-day retreats, and something, a personal sense of self, it disappeared. Yet you went walking around, you could see, trees and stuff like that. The world was still there, but something was gone. Now, tell us a bit about the actual experience.
I think that describes it, like the personal sense of, I guess, the person Puneet disappeared, but the perception of the world was still there. And it was beautiful, but I didn't feel like a person when I was looking at things.
Yet you walked around, you went to the meal, you went back and sat in meditation for the next session.
Yeah.
And you may have even had thought.
Mm-hmm.
Did you?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. So it's very different. There's no question about it. But there's a sense of agency there. But what's gone is the identification. Any thoughts from any of you in Zoom land on this? And I didn't mean to put Puneet on the spot, but the reason I asked him to share it is so that you know that it's not just theoretical. It's something that's available to us all. And in the end, that can become our new, ordinary, normal mind state. Next verse.
Ahankara Prabhu Sambhya Vishayanartaki Matihi Taladi Dharina Kshani Deepa Sakshya Vabhasakaha. In this illustration, the patron is the ego, the various sense objects are the audience, the intellect is the dancer, the musicians playing on their instruments are the sense organs, and the light illumining them all is the witness consciousness.
Yes. So these are the various characters identified in his story of being in the theater. The idea is the light just illumines everything. And the ego comes and goes if the patron decides to go home because the show's running well. That's a good thing. Not a necessary fellow at all. Next verse.
Swasthana sanstito deepa sarvato bhasayedhyata sthirasthai tatha sakshi bahiranta prakashayet. As the light reveals all the objects remaining in its own place, so the witness consciousness itself, ever motionless, illumines the objects within and without, including the operations of the mind.
Yes. I am the knower of all sense objects. Swamiji used to say, I go nowhere. The world passes in front of me. It illumines the thoughts and feelings of the mind. It can illumine the rising and falling of the karma if it tends to come back. But the subtle intellect gets transformed by its knowledge that it's not the self. It's not a person. It's just a function in the mind. So the mind itself quits believing itself. Hypothetically, oh, why did I do that? That was such a stupid thing to do. Oh, I'm such a piece of shit. That was a completely stupid thought. Where did that arise from? Oh, well, it doesn't matter. Ciao. Unreal. Oh, I did so good at work. I accomplished this. Everybody thought I'm smart. Maybe I'll get a raise. You know, I'm just really hot stuff. Well, that's a stupid thought. Ciao. Be gone. I was taught Jiao means get out, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Next verse.
Bahir anta vibhagoyam dehapeksho na sakshini vishaya bahya deshastha dehasthyantara hankritihi. The distinction between external and internal objects refers to the body and not to the witness consciousness. Sense objects are outside the body, whereas the ego is within the body.
Yes. So for the ignorant person, the objects are outside and inside are my feelings, my thoughts, etc. But to the yogi, they are all external. They're just gross and subtle. There are no thoughts or feelings in me. I am ever the witness. Or as the scripture says, closer than hand or foot, closer than your breath, closer than your innermost, most private thoughts. It's my very self. Next verse.
Antasthaddhi sahaivakshe bahiryati punah punah bhasya buddhi sthachal chanchalyam sakshinyaropyate vritha. The mind seated within goes out again with the sense organs. In vain, people seek to impose the fickleness of the mind illumined by the witness consciousness on the latter.
Yes. So the problem is adhyasa, superimposition. I see the world of name and form. And then what does the mind do? I am happy. I am sad. I am successful. I am a failure. I'm okay. I'm not okay. That's nothing more than an incredibly mechanical and repetitive reaction of the mind to external stimuli based on the force of the past. It's so repetitive. And if you really watch, it gets really boring. So the mind itself quits investing in that whole process. Next verse.
Grihanta ragata swalpo gavakshadap pochalah tatra haste nartyamane nrityati vapato yatha. The streak of sunlight coming into the room through an opening is motionless, but if one dances one's hand in the rays, the light appears to be dancing.
Yes. Or one of the things I find which is similar is if there's dust in the room, you see a beam of light. But then if someone walks through the room and disturbs the airflow, it looks like the beam is moving. No, it's the dust in the room that's moving. The light is kutastha, still, ever present. So also, it seems like I go through changes. I never really do. It's an illusion. And it falls if we investigate. Next verse.
Nijasthanasthita sakshi bahiranta gamagamao akurvan buddhi chanchalyat karotiva tatha tatha. Similarly, the witness consciousness, though really fixed in its own place and neither going out nor returning within, yet appears to move owing to the restless nature of the mind.
Yes. So it seems to the mind that when the chitta, the stuff of mind, goes through its permutations, the self goes through permutations, even though in fact it never does. It's always sthita, still, always sakshi, the witness. No personal sense of self is real. If I feel like a person, I'm deluded. Stop it. Ciao. Get out. Next verse.
Na bahyo nantara sakshi buddhair deshau hi tat tavu bhao buddhayadhya shesha sanshantao yatra bhasasti tatra saha. The witness consciousness can neither be called external nor internal. Both these terms have reference to the mind. When the mind becomes fully tranquil, the witness exists where it shines.
So the fact that it feels like I am inside and the world is outside is due to the fluctuations of the mind. Now, it's hard. Upanishad says the Lord created the senses without going tendencies. We could say the Lord created the mind with outgoing tendencies. That's its nature. It's to know stuff, to consider stuff, to judge stuff. That's what it's designed to do. And in that, it creates this sense of agency, this karta. So we have to go through the process of quieting the mind. How do we do this? There are primary tools: viveka, vairagya, samadhi guna. Constant discrimination between the real and the unreal, the self and the not self, the subject and all the objects. Once I can see that it's not self, vairagya, drop, drop, drop. Samadhi guna, qualities of shama, etc. We've been through them many times. Tuning up the mind. Mumukshutva, making moksha, freedom, the goal of my life, so that I don't become inadvertent, so that I don't become slothful in my practice. If I do, then comes indiscriminate revelry with the objects of the senses, the thickening, the fattening of ahankara. Then I start to suffer again. The ignorance gets thicker. It's hard to practice, so I quit practicing. I become a fallen yogi. And Gita says the fallen yogi is rarely seen to rise again. Hopefully he does. Next verse.
देशकोऽपि न भासेत यदि तर्ह्यत्व देशभाक् सर्वदेशप्रकल्पत्रैव सर्वगत्वं न तु स्वतः. If it be said that when all mental operations cease, there is no space at all, we reply, let it have no space. It is called all-pervasive because of the mind's creation of space.
So what Vidyaranya is saying here is time and space are in fact creations of the mind. Again, this becomes very clear if we go to the dream state. In the dream, I create space in which the dream takes place. And time, I'm driving the car up the mountain road from the bottom to the top. I'm moving through space in time. Time is not an absolute. Space is not an absolute. Physics is starting to acknowledge that. So, What is it? In which time and space occur, and all the stuff in it. Stop the mind and you stop the world. Thin the mind, tanu manasa, and you thin the world. And what's left is witnessing consciousness. Can't even call it a witness anymore when the world disappears. It is avyapadesha, describing. Next verse.
Antarbirhirva sarvam va yam desham parikalpayet buddhir tadreshaga sakshi tatha vastushu yojayet. Whatever space, internal or external, the intellect imagines is pervaded by the witness consciousness. Similarly, will the witness consciousness be related to all other objects?
Yes. So inside and outside in the end have no meaning. Again, I find it easiest to go to the dream state, as Gaudapada invites us to do. In the dream state, I have the locus of perception in the dream body, who looks outside at a dream world and then thinks and feels what appears to be inside. But the witness is knowing it all. All of the dream perceptions, the dream body, the dream interior, supposedly, thoughts and feelings, are all witnessed. This is no different. All of it is in consciousness. All of it is the play of mind. Now listen carefully. Shunahu. In the end, the idea that there's a thing called my mind and other people's minds and the total mind is a complete illusion. It's another construct. When you really start looking at where do my thoughts and feelings come from, you can't find a thing called my mind. It's just mine. Whether it comes from the outside, somebody else's thought I'm tuning into, or out of my own karmic stream, well, can I really say it's my own karmic stream? Where did that come from? We deal with it the same way. Neti, neti, not this, not this. I have no thoughts or feelings of my own. Jao, you know. All right, one more.
Yadra padi kalpayeta buddhya tatta prakashayan tasya bhavet sakshi swato vagbuddha gocharaha. Whatever form the intellect imagines, the Supreme Self illumines it as its witness, remaining itself beyond the grasp of speech and mind.
So it is the intellect itself which forms external perceptions, the sense organs themselves, the internal reactions to them, and that individual sense of agency. But the consciousness that illumines them is ever unattached and separate from. The names and forms are not evil, not bad, they're not disgusting. They have no real power to bind. Asanguham, 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 puna punaha, Satchidananda Rupaham, aham evaham avyayam. Unattached, unattached, unattached am I again. My form is existence, consciousness, this absolute. I am that I. Immutable. Swaha. Okay, what verse are we on for next week?
24.
All right, we'll end here. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari